Welcome to the examine room. What up, guys? Oh, that's just a lovely little shirt my wife gave me. It's Bernie Sanders getting dragged during the civil rights movement. Yeah, he was protesting at the time. My girl really knows how to spoil me. Anyways, let's get down to it. On the last episode, we were examining Black Lives Matter. And now in this episode, we're going to examine police policy reform and monitoring for peace of mind. Okay, so let's get started. Now, why am I bringing this up? Okay, so there have been a lot of people who have made different notions about police and whether or not there are some racial issues or not, there's some biases or not. Now, let's start with how policing started. Now, in the North, it was policing was created for protecting pretty much goods and shipping. But in the South, now that's a different story. Here's a quote. In the South, however, the economics that drove the creation of police forces were centered not on the protection of shipping interests, but on the preservation of the slavery system. Some of the primary policing institutions there were the slave patrols tasked with chasing down runaways and preventing slave revolts. Potter says the first formal slave patrol had been created in the Carolina colonies in 1704. Okay, so the argument being made about how there is no such thing as bias, yes, there is in the South. I don't even think African Americans, I don't know if African Americans are still getting a fair deal in this for voting in the South. So, you know, and obviously there's still discrimination in the South by policing. Okay, so people are going to say, okay, well, that was back in the day. You know, that was before. You know, now it's different. Okay. Now let's talk about current events. Let's talk about the war on drugs. Now, war on drugs, everybody's got an issue. There's a back and forth conflict. But marijuana, I got to say, in this current day and age, everybody knows it's not a big deal. People say it's a gateway drug. That's not true. Back in the day, Reefer Madness, all this stuff was just a marketing tool to go against the war on drugs and also to go against people who were trying to protest and trying to start a revolution and all this stuff. And that included African American people and hippies. Now, let's get something real. So if you get caught with a little bit of pot, what happens? Well, let me tell you what happens. And I quote. When people are arrested for possessing even tiny amounts of marijuana, it can have dire collateral consequences that affect their eligibility for public housing and student financial aid, employment opportunities, child custody determinations, and immigration status. Now, if you're a kid from Nigeria or something like that, and you decide to come to the country, or you're a kid from Africa and you decide to come to the country, and you want to give an opportunity, and let's say a kid decides to hand you a little joint, you decide to smoke it, and it was a white kid. Is it really fair that that white kid gets away with it, but that African American kid doesn't, or that African kid doesn't? See, okay, now people are going to say, well, that's not true. He's not going to get away with it. Like, if you were going to pull that hypothetical, if there was a white kid and a black kid next to each other, they would have both gotten arrested at the same rate, right? Wrong. No. And I quote, according to the ACLU's original analysis, marijuana arrests now account for over half of all drug arrests in the United States. Of the 8.2 million marijuana arrests between 2001 and 2010, 88% were for simply having marijuana. Nationwide, the arrest data revealed one consistent trend: significant racial bias. Despite roughly equal usage rates, blacks are 3.73 times more likely than whites to get arrested for possession of marijuana. Okay, so if you get arrested for even having a tiny bit of pot and your color, you're screwed. That means their employment, all that stuff, it's out the window. Forget it. You will never have a life again. So what do you got to do now? Now you got to become a criminal. Now you got to be a thief. Now you got to do whatever you got to do to survive. And then you're considered you're considered a criminal. You're not considered someone trying to, survive. You're just considered someone who is obviously looking to do something bad. That's just wrong. And it shows here that statistically, white people haven't been getting it easier, so there is some bias. Okay. Maybe that's not enough. Drugs. Okay, we could probably change the rules on that, make the federal to federal. That's the only thing we need to do about that. So there won't be any more racism after that. Okay. Wrong. People are going to say, well, black people, black people are probably dying at the average normal rate. Here's a quote. That year, the Washington Post began tallying how many people were shot and killed by police. By the end of 2015, officers had fatally shot nearly 1,000 people, twice as many as ever documented in 1 year by the federal government. Okay, so 1,000. Okay, so let's make the argument here. If it was 3, 20, 40, maybe we could say, well, that's an entire year, 365 days in years, things are going to happen. 1,000 people? 1,000 African Americans? Really? You were fearing for your life that much? So, to say that we're not killing a lot of black people, that's a lie. We are. Disproportionately killing a lot of them unarmed. And it's completely and utterly wrong. Now, there's a lot of things we can talk about. Okay? It took until the 1960s for people to be able to have equal rights. Okay? Segregation, another time. Okay? Stop and frisk. I mean, there are so many... Okay, let's talk about stop and frisk. If you don't already know, stop and frisk literally just targeted African American people. That was their job. That was a quota. They had to get African American people and frisk them. They had to, no matter what, it wasn't for any reason. They would just have to frisk African American people. It didn't matter if they didn't have a record or not. They just had to frisk them. They had to check them. That is discrimination at its highest level. Oh, but crime rates were down. No, that's not how we do this. That's not how we do this. Now, my solution. Let's start with the first one. Replacing or reforming the policies on policing. And what I mean by that is that police officers are being told that they need to, it's kill or be killed kind of situation, and that already in itself is not a good idea. I get it. You guys have a very stressful job. I understand that. That's why when you get into the position, you have to know where you're getting yourself into. Just like when people go to war, they have to know what they're getting themselves into. You're not just going to go to war because you're like, okay, I have to die for my country. No, you're going to decide whether it's worth dying for your country or not. Just like when you decide whether it's worth being a policeman or not. So what I was suggesting before was that, because Bernie Sanders has said this before, and I have to agree with him on this. We have to get police in local communities to work with people in local communities. Now, why would I say that? I would say that because it helps people know who they're working with, you know? When I go work as a merchandiser, I have to get to know the receiver and the manager, so that way I know who I'm working with. That way they know whether or not I'm going to show up, if I'm going to do a good job, if I'm good with them, if they need something, they come to me. So it seems like it would be much more financially efficient. It would save us a lot of money if we just worked with our local communities instead of working on this idea that police officers are just superheroes who don't do wrong. Of course they do wrong. That's not, and there are that do good. Let's not start going in this one direction over the other. Let's meet in the middle with this thing, okay? Now, we need to make them work together. And on top of that, we need to let them make sure that they don't use their gun. You have a lot of training to use for shooting ranges. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people will say, well, don't do the shooting in the arm and leg thing. I'd rather you shoot the arm and the leg. I know people are like, no, don't shoot them at all. I agree. But if there was a situation for extreme measures, I would shoot them in the arm and leg. If somebody started pulling a gun, if there was actually a gun being pulled out, I would shoot them in the arm and leg. I would rather take a lawsuit than to take a life. That's just the truth. Okay? If I was a police officer. I don't know why that's even an argument, death or a lawsuit. So if you get the local community to work together with local police enforcement, police officers get to know their local community, so they'll get to know their people. So they'll know who's good and who's bad, who's a troublemaker and who's not a troublemaker, who's a stand-up person. Like if, let's say you get into a situation, you see an African-American person in the middle of the night, and this police officer knows this African-American gentleman. And one officer is like, oh, look, he's a criminal. Oh, he's doing something bad. Like, let's say he's trying to open the door to a store. He's like, oh, man, that guy's trying to steal something. And that police officer that knows him goes, wait, hold on now. I know that guy. He actually owns that shop. No. He's good. Hey, Jerry. That would be better than to killing him. Because you don't know him. It's better we get to know our people so that way we don't harm our people. Okay? I know you guys have an extreme difficult job. I just want to make sure that we have the proper safety moves, procedures. For example, not taking out the weapon. Yes, you can take it unholster. You can play it safe and stuff like that. But for the love of God, it doesn't have to resolve to shooting. There should be other ways to de-escalate. There should be training UFC style when it comes to disarming someone or not having to use their weapon at all, and they can just use their fighting techniques. There's a lot of things that I think that we could do to make this a lot better. I'm sure there's a lot more other policy reforms that other people have suggestions, and I would love to hear them on my comments below. And the second thing I want to talk about is the monitoring for peace of mind. Now, back in the day, I used to work as a Sparklets driver. And as a Sparklets driver, they had this little monitoring camera right there in the front of the truck. Right in front of your dashboard. Right there in front of you for you to see. Right in your face. So, and it has a camera also pointing out outside. So, in case anything were to happen, you were to get into any kind of like bumps or roughs or you hit something, the camera would turn on red. It wouldn't be on the whole time, but if you did any accident, it would turn on. It would record the 10-15 seconds before it turned on, and then it would show what happened, what incident occurred, and all that stuff. And a lot of the guys were like, oh, I don't like this, like they're spying on us. I mean, they should be able to trust us to be able to drive. But at the same time, there is an argument to be made that it made things a lot more safer. You had to be more cautious. You had to be more safer. There wasn't any way you could go around it. So I think that could be said about policing. There should be body cameras on them. We should be spending money on that instead of giving them more weapons to use. I mean, there hasn't been a war that we need a whole bunch of geared weapons for right now at this point. We just need police officers to kind of do more of the right thing. Now, if we have a body camera on them, more peace of mind. Now, if you cover the camera and stuff like that, there obviously should be some consequences because clearly, if there is a killing at that moment and you covered your camera, you're guilty. I can't imagine you making anything else. If you covered your camera and you're looking for something, you're obviously stashing something because that actually was a video shown before, you're guilty. It's better to have them monitored because we're paying our taxpayers' dollars for them to shoot us. Okay, no. We're paying for them to take care of us, to protect us. But we have to make sure that they're being held accountable. There's always been this, like, cops are good and when they kill someone it's because they were a criminal and they deserved it. That's not true. Not every person we know and love or not know is a killer or a bad person or a criminal. You don't know their life. You haven't gotten to know them to judge them like that. So I'm just making this very clear. We need to do better. Police reforming policies, and we need to actually have them monitored with cameras so that way we have a little more peace of mind knowing that they're getting paid to protect us, not getting paid to harm us.